What's going on, guys? The Arid Lords here. Welcome back to another review. This time, not for The Walking Dead, but for another drama-related television show. One of my favorite game series of all times. My first RPG, actually. Back during the Fallout 3 days, when I was in middle school. Feels like 1,000 years ago. But yes, once upon a time, I picked up lowly game Fallout 3 and pretty much fell in love with the universe. Bethesda stepped in around that time to take control of the IP. It was in the hands of a different studio back in the early 2000s, late 90s. Fallout 1 and 2 came out on the PC back then. And the IP kind of was just dead for a good chunk of years until Bethesda decided to revive it. And they certainly have. What we're going to be reviewing for you is the Fallout TV series, which is an Amazon Prime exclusive. And with me to do so, also in the background of the co-op gameplay you're seeing, even though it's a one-player game, but when this game first came out, Fallout 4 is the footage you're seeing. I've also interspliced some Fallout 3 footage as well when I was doing the countdown back in 2015. But Pete or P-Dog, who's been on the channel a long time ago at different points, earlier in the history, whenever, is reviewing with the series with me today, is also in the background of the footage, all encompassing. Say hello.
Also in the background of this actual audio. Hopefully, you guys can hear me better than the last time I was here. The last time I was on this channel was the Last of Us TV series, funnily enough, which we're going to be making, well, I will at least be making a fair amount of comparisons with the two series because they both have quite similar inceptions. They have a kind of well-established showrunner and then the actual game developer as well working alongside it. But yeah, I had a very similar experience to the games with you. I picked up Fallout 3 for the first time, yeah, probably around like '09. I think back when I had like a PS3, way back in the day, jeez. This was before my 360 days. And played through the whole thing. My dad actually watched it for a fair portion, so I've got really fond memories of that game. And yeah, it just kind of had a really big effect on me, whether it was for the other circumstances or the game itself. New Vegas, I got for like Christmas of the year it came out. Loved that as well. Fallout 4, we obviously both played together. And I thought it was good. Not as good as the previous generation of games, and then 76 I never played. But when the TV show first came out, first I'll ask for your opinions on it. Like whenever you first heard of a Fallout series being announced, because obviously fun little behind the scenes fact, I was livid when I heard that a Fallout series was being made because like 10 years ago when me and Chris first did like the writer's block and stuff, like we're talking way back then. I had these kind of grandiose plans of like Fallout would be like the best game ever to make into because this is back whenever games were terrible as like films and TV shows and stuff. Like no one could get it right. And I remember thinking, okay, Game of Thrones is out right now. You know, there's these here big kind of shows that are out that are like blockbuster, like Hollywood movies in TV show format. Fallout would be the perfect world to do that in. And this was like 2013. And, you know, I think it was like 3 years ago, maybe they announced the show. So I think it was around COVID time or just after COVID time had ended. They announced the show. I was obviously quite bitter that it wasn't me show running it. But I was very happy, though, that they were going to make an adaptation because I had faith. Well, I wouldn't say I had faith because obviously at that point, video game conversions were still not that very well received. But I was kind of like, okay, if there's one that you can't mess up, it's going to be Fallout because there's so much material, there's so much lore, there's so much world building within the games. Because you know the game series has been going on for like 20 years or something now. You know you've got a lot of stuff to work with. But what was your first reactions when you heard of the Fallout kind of TV show being announced?
I was excited, but I was admittedly slightly skeptical because you have to keep in mind this was before I had even seen The Last of Us. So, video game adaptations to TV or movie were really unproven. And the track record that they had, and I was saying this to a friend the other day, that this was always a taboo area of media. Like, whenever an exec, I imagine in a boardroom, said, hey, like, I got like a new film idea I'm gonna pitch. It's like, oh, is it an original IP? Like, where'd it come from? Oh, it's based off a video game. Like, it immediately would be like, okay, next. Like, there's no proven track record that those A, make money, and B, are successful in terms of entertainment value. The ones that I think the two big ones are the old Resident Evil movies and Assassin's Creed, the original movie. And even though the Assassin's Creed movie was based off the game and it didn't follow Desmond's story and it didn't follow it to a T and it tried to do its own thing, very sloppy, not well done. And this just continued. I don't know if it was the leadership, I don't know if it was like how they decided to tackle the universe, but it just wasn't satisfactory to fans. And fans would always be like, oh, why are you redoing a video game plot line? Because the story of at least the first Assassin's Creed's very well done cinematically within those games. Like, it's like, why do I feel like I need to, see things in a different format? Like, I think the presentation of this is well done. It doesn't need to be changed. And there was no financial investment to kind of get that going, so it just kind of sat as a dead entity for a long time. But, and I guess I'll get your opinion on this, if Last of Us is the inception of this, or if, there's also the Halo TV series, which I think, is more reminiscent of, without turning this into a Halo review, is more reminiscent of the failures and pitfalls of Assassin's Creed, where there are still terrible video game adaptations being made. It's not enough just to take the game and say, hey, let's run with whatever, throw in some Easter eggs, and, there we go. Fans are satisfied, and we'll make a boatload of money. I think
there's been quite a lot of video game IPs that are coming out. Like in the past 5 years, if you think about it, we had 2 Sonic the Hedgehog movies, we had a Mario Brothers movie, we've had the Halo TV show, which, as you said, not really a Halo franchise, to be honest. Like, it has Halo stuff in it, but you couldn't really say it's like a Halo TV show, like something like The Last of Us is. Arcane, which I haven't seen yet, but I've heard is very, very good on Netflix. There's a Cyberpunk show on Netflix, which apparently is really, really good as well. And now, obviously, this Fallout show, which, not to really go into our full feelings yet, but it's generally been received very well, I would say, across the board. So we are starting to see this kind of huge spike in video game IPs that are making money, that are being received very well by audiences, which is primarily the best part. But for the industry, it's making a lot of money, which is all they care about, to be honest. And with that, it probably means we're going to spawn more. I'm pretty sure Nintendo were talking about making a Link, like a Legend of Zelda movie. There's going to be there's a third Sonic movie coming out. Season 2 of The Last of Us has been confirmed. I'm pretty sure Season 2 of Fallout has been confirmed.
You even had Uncharted, which I completely forgot about, which was like a one-off on Netflix. Yeah, pretty much all of, other than the animated ones, but yeah, Naughty Dog's real-life games have all been adapted to some type of film, television media. I mean, you have to assume this will follow with some of... Is it out of the realm to make a Call of Duty movie or TV series? I know that would be just Band of Brothers or something, but that's not completely out of the realm.
Yeah, I mean, The Witcher, another one. Flip me.
Witcher
on Netflix, yeah. So basically, this has been happening since 2018. I want to say this has been kind of on the upswing, and Skyrim has also been, well, not Skyrim, but Elder Scrolls has been. I think it's either heavily rumored or it has been greenlit to begin production, an Elder Scrolls kind of TV series, which I imagine will be similar to Fallout. But anyway, right, to go back to actual Fallout itself, when the show was kind of being made, they announced the cast, they announced all the stuff going on. But one of the biggest things that people wanted to know was, are the events of the show going to be based on a previous game? Because you've got a lot to work with. You've got Fallout 1, 2, 3, 4, New Vegas, 76. There's a Brotherhood of Steel game. I think Tactics is another one as well. And Todd Howard came out and basically said it'll be a completely original story following 3 different characters, but it is canon in the universe, essentially. So all the events of the previous Fallouts did occur, and they are valid in the show, which obviously is quite good, but at the same time, it's a very difficult line to toe when you're talking about RPG with multiple endings, because we may talk about this, it might be more fitted for the spoiler section, but on a general sense, it's kind of hard to understand, okay, what endings for the previous games are canon in the show, essentially. And there's not really any real hints yet to know kind of what ones they went through with. But they said it was an original story, which I think was probably the best way to go about it. The Last of Us did just the first game, which kind of made it easier for the show, if I'm being honest. I think Fallout took more of a risk by going for a completely original story just set in the world. But I think it was really ballsy, and I think for the most part it paid off. I think the story was pretty engaging. But
Yeah.
yeah, the show came out in a oneer, 8 episodes, boom, dropped. Which I'm a bit of a weird take, but I'm not a big fan of that really
Yeah.
because it doesn't really give you enough time to really think about each episode.
Depends the streaming service. Like if you get
Yeah.
Prime, they'll do that. If you get something like, when I was doing my review vlogs for the Rick Michonne show, that was painstakingly you got to wait on AMC to next Sunday, and it does. It builds anticipation, and it let me do vlogs for the channel to be like, what's gonna happen? You can do predictions and stuff. So yeah.
But yeah, the show all dropped all at once. And Chris, what is your kind of very general overview take on the show as a whole? What do you make of it?
Yeah. So I think all the character motivations are all well defined. So you get the three, and it's nice that you get them from each corner of the universe because the Brotherhood of Steel is a very prominent faction. Their power armor image is on the cover of almost every game except New Vegas, which is the
I think they're
Courier.
the only faction that's in every single game.
The Courier is on the cover of New Vegas. Yeah. But yeah, no. So yeah, the
I
Brotherhood.
know, but like no, I mean like the Brotherhood of Steel, like their presence is in every single
Oh
game. So,
yes, exactly. Yeah. So
so
you,
it would make sense for them to be one of the main kind of draws of the show as well.
Yep. Yep, exactly. Yeah. So you get one from each. You get a segment with the ghouls, you get a segment with the Brotherhood of Steel, you get a Vault Dweller, and it allows you to experience all different, this is a very large world. There's so many things, there's so many different things that spawned after both before and after the apocalypse. There's companies, brands, experimentations. Obviously, after the apocalypse, there's all these different brands of monsters. Like, there's the factions, there's the monsters, there's the different types of guns. Like, you have all these subsections, like guns, monsters, factions, locations, different terminology, like irradiated water, like even like medical supplies in the universe, Radaway stim packs, etc., etc. And I think overall, it was a fine balance between the character motivations and there was just enough Easter eggs and lore drops to make it like part of the universe. And it was also had a touch of comedy onto it too. Because let's not forget, Fallout, both games, 3, 4, and New Vegas, they all have some like ridiculous funny segments. Like the one that sticks out to me from Fallout 3 is the Naughty Nightwear side quest, where there's this super secret important package, and you go into this, you have to lockpick, and it ends up being these like leopard striped pajamas, and then this raider is like yelling to give you the Naughty Nightwear. It's a very very classic line from Fallout 3. But there are those types of like
Yeah, I mean,
funny.
New Vegas had a whole like perk about just funny, scenarios, like the Wild Wasteland perk, where just random things will happen near you, like really weird, like just funny, like segments of
Right,
things.
and it toes the line between being serious and also being a parody. But I felt like they glazed the product with just enough parody that it didn't overwhelm the overall product. That you could kind of like laugh at it, but I was still following the story seriously. I was still following Lucy trying to find her dad. I was still following the ghoul kind of being this, run amok, like just outcast wastelander. Almost a version of like, oh, if Lucy went down the dark path, like maybe she would turn into this type of person. And then you've got Maximus, who's within the Brotherhood Society. So it was a monumental task, I think, to show, because you need to show the societies of all these different places, like the Brotherhood and how they have their creed, the fact that they're almost these warrior priests within
Yeah, that was
in
one
the
of the changes
universe.
that they made that was kind of a strange one for me. Like I kind of added like a religion aspect to the Brotherhood. Like that was never really a thing in the games. I'm not really sure why they did that. If I'm being honest, it just seemed a bit kind of out there because like they had that kind of initiation thing in like the first episode, and
The
like the guy.
outcasts were, and I don't think they. And now the out that storyline was like now you've said because Fallout 3 to this many years in between. So I don't know if you remember in Fallout 3 there were the outcasts and then the Brotherhood of Steel. The outcasts treated technology more like a religion to like
Yeah,
safeguard it and all that stuff. I think over the course of those 30 years, like the outcasts eventually like merged with the faction. So some of that is still there. But the fact that they always regarded like medieval, they were basically medieval wastelanders. Like they always, they call them knights and squires. Like they always call them within this faction, the branding. Like I didn't mind that. Like I honestly, it's been a while since I've played the game, so like I know that like believing in the creed, believing in that, like that was always like a big part to like prove yourself to be a knight is to be a defender. Like that meant something. So I felt that was in the same realm. Again, like I don't remember like too much from the games of like how deep religious it was. Um, the vault stuff was definitely like always the thing with the vaults is this seems like a safe haven for people, but it's secretly spearheaded by an evil corporation that's doing experiments on people. And that was always the thing in all the Fallout games. Each vault was for different experimentations. And I was telling my friend Jared, who I watched it with, I was like, because he somehow didn't play Fallout 3. So I'm like, he played 4. And so I was like, oh, in Fallout 3, there's a vault where they made the super mutants. There's a vault where they test music on people to like make them go insane and see if that has an adverse effect on them. There's a vault where they clone someone named Gary over and over again. Like every vault had its gimmick of what like it each had a different purpose of what it was trying to do. And so I was like, okay, and that was in the plot of this, the 31, 32, 33, that overarching plot of the
Well, you don't really know what it is, obviously, for most of the show.
you don't know what it is for most of the show.
Again, we'll probably save that for a little later in the video, like as to what's maybe going on. But you can kind of tell, like if you're going into a Fallout show, you kind of know if there's a vault and it's too good to be true, it probably is. This actually comes up again with a later vault that happened that they visit later on in the show. But yeah, the vaults were definitely one of the more interesting components of the Fallout franchise in general because, again, like you say, they're very kind of unique, every single one of them. And as you say, they all start off normal in the surface, but there's an undercurrent of sinisterness behind them. Because obviously the people that were in charge of them were maybe people that didn't really have humanity's best intentions at hand. But yeah, and then obviously you had the ghoul who was basically just showing like the kind of what the wasteland really is like. You know, like he's almost like the most similar character to like a Fallout protagonist as you would. Even though like the Vault Dweller is, it's almost like the different stages. You know, like the Vault Dweller is almost like you at the beginning. The ghoul is like you in the middle, and then like the flipping Brotherhood of Steel, like heavily armored, guns blazing guy is like near the end. I actually saw a really good comparison for this. Actually, Chris, I think you'll like this. Someone said that the three main protagonists. This isn't really a spoiler because they're kind of like this for the entire show. The three main protagonists reflect the three different karma options. Because Lucy, who's the Vault Dweller, she's good karma. The ghoul is bad karma, and then Maximus, who's the Brotherhood of Steel Knight, not Knight, sorry, he's the Scribe. He's like neutral karma, and I really like that interpretation.
I never thought about it like that. That's pretty good. Yeah, no, and there were times when the ghoul did something where I'm like, that's an evil action. Like I almost thought like, oh, the bad karma. You've been demoted bad karma. Like when he was when we first meet him in the town and he's shooting up a whole bunch of people. Like I can imagine like that bad karma like sound effect happening,
killing everyone. Yeah,
yep.
Because that's a very typical Fallout thing of going into a settlement and just murdering everyone. Because if you want to be a bad guy, there's nothing in the game stopping you from doing that. And then obviously Lucy, she's basically obviously trying to do the right thing, and she's deliberately trying to help everyone. And then Maximus is just kind of in the middle because he will let people die, but he'll also try and like save people as well. So I guess we'll talk more about the actual story itself, like what happens. So to anyone that really is out of the loop in Fallout, in the year 2077, of which we do get a lot of flashbacks to, so that is covered quite a bit, like the years leading up to.
I like that they kept doing it throughout the series, like even deep, and it coincided with the events of the show very nicely. I thought that was done very nicely.
So in 2077, sorry, America's kind of living in like a kind of 1950s, 60s aesthetic with like futuristic technology. Like people were kind of driving like old cars and they had like old TV sets and stuff. But there were like robots cutting about and there were kind of futuristic medication and robotics and stuff. But the kind of consensus is that the world is heading towards consumerism in general. And in 2077, basically, the entire world's kind of rocked when nuclear war happens and bombs fall, and everyone has to take shelter in these vaults. And anyone that doesn't take shelter in a vault is basically massacred. And that occurred. That is a canon event in every single game. That happens in 2077, and the events of the game take place at some point after those events. That's the Great War, they call it. Fallout 76, which is the most recent Fallout game that came out. That's the most recent game to like the earliest game in the timeline. The show was actually the latest in the timeline. So the show takes place, I believe. Let me just double check this here. So the bombs fall in 2077. The show takes place in 2296, which is what 222 years in the future, essentially, or 200. No, sorry, 219. Is that? Yeah, 219 years in the future.
Yeah, so I didn't know that, and they don't make mention in the show how many years after, because we have time periods for Fallout 3 and 4, and
Yeah.
like the years that those generally take place. So this is far beyond that.
Yeah. So to put it in context, by the way, and I'll mention this more in the spoiler section and predictions for future series. The events of the early Fallout games take place in like the 2100s essentially. Fallout 2 takes place in 2241, for example. I bring up Fallout 1 and 2 because they're the only games that also take place in California. So some Fallout loyalists were kind of looking and lining up things there. Fallout 3 takes place in 2277, so exactly 200 years after the bombs fell. New Vegas takes place 4 years later in 2281. Fallout 4 takes place in 2287, and then 9 years later is when the TV show comes out. So it's by far the latest in the franchise.
Yeah, and that's why you see the Brotherhood already has access to the Pridwin. They steal the Enclave's, helicopter Ospreys, the Vertibirds, because they didn't have those. And once they defeat them at Adam Air Force Base,
Yeah.
that's So anyone who's played Fallout, like, you probably know a lot of this stuff. You probably know a lot of the story and how that whole thing goes along.
Actually, the Enclave mention actually kind of ties back into the story part because Lucy basically lives in this vault, and 200 and so years in the future, and her dad gets kidnapped by raiders. Essentially, her dad gets kidnapped, and she decides to open the vault door, which is considered sacrilege across her community, to go and find her dad. Very similar plots to Fallout 3 and 4, also made by Bethesda, by the way. Important distinction I should make is that Fallout 3 and 4 are the only Bethesda made Fallout games. New Vegas was made by Obsidian, who made Fallout 1 and 2. And then 76, I don't even know who made that. I don't think it was Bethesda. But anyway. So she basically leaves, and in a very similar twist to the previous Bethesda Fallout games, she's on a quest to find a family member. So she's finding her dad, just like the Fallout 3 protagonist, funnily enough. Meanwhile, the ghoul wakes up from a kind of slumber, and he's a bounty hunter who's on the hunt for a Enclave scientist who's basically ran away. And this is also the orders of the Brotherhood of Steel to also hunt this guy down. So it basically becomes a goose chase between the two of them, and then later Lucy also tries to find the Lucy also is involved in this some way because she basically is also trying to she meets up with the Enclave scientist early on whenever she leaves the vault, and the two of them basically go on their adventure together, and she basically needs him as well for story reasons essentially. So basically all three of them are chasing after the same thing, and this kind of becomes like the kind of what do they call it? What do they call it? The MacGuffin? The MacGuffin? Is that what they call it? Basically, yeah. Everyone's looking for this one item for their own interests. So Maximus is a kind of scribe who wants to become a knight in the Brotherhood, and he thinks that if he can get this Enclave scientist, then he'll be seen better in the Brotherhood because he's getting bullied in the beginning of the show. The ghoul just wants money. Essentially, he couldn't really care less. And then Lucy.
Well, originally you think that, but then as you learn more about him, you realize.
Yeah, that's the thing. All these things, there's more to it than that, obviously. But I'm going to save all that for the spoiler section. But as the story kind of progresses, I do kind of enjoy it. I like the kind of overlapping, and as you say, I like the flashbacks. They might be one of my favorite parts, actually, the flashbacks, because that's a world that you don't even see in the games. They can really have fun with that. It reminds me of like the Last of Us. Whenever they cut back to like the Nick Offerman episode 3. With him and Frank or whatever, when the two of them kind of have their relationship, I really enjoy the episode because it's so different from the games. And I feel like I quite like the flashbacks in the show because of a similar reason, because you never really get to see what the world is like in in the 2060s and 2070s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. While I'm trying to think, for what I couldn't remember was because this takes place in that Southern California, you were saying, like when she comes out of the vault, Lucy, the wheel, like the wheel on the pier, which is a very iconic landmark. And Fallout's 1 and 2 take place, one takes place in Southern California, the other takes place in Northern California. For reference, Fallout 1 takes place in 2161 and Fallout 2 takes place in 2241. And then it's 33 years later that Fallout 3 happens. So the events of 1 and 2 are like, far outdated, I guess, at this point. So, like, there's probably no reason they'd make any reference to that. The Enclave is also a heavy presence in that because they're also, like, a major force, but, Yeah.
There's one particular reason as to why that was being kind of brought up quite a bit, and I'll mention it because it's quite a big spoiler, so I'll mention it in the spoiler section as to why that was kind of brought up significantly. It's more of Fallout 1 in general, and, like, there's a particular segment in one of the episodes that kind of diehard Fallout fans were kind of like, oh, like, that's really inconsistent, like kind of having that there, like basically having this happen during this timeline essentially was a bit weird. But in general, the setting that probably is a good segue actually to talk about the world itself. I feel like we talked a fair bit about the premise of the story and all that, but the actual world itself, I was really really impressed with. I think that's one of the things that people were most happy about. Like, it basically does look like a real life Fallout. Like, everything that you would hope for, it looks identical into the game. The vaults look identical to what the vaults are like in the game. Even the jumpsuits, the bobbleheads, the guns, the creatures. Like, we don't actually see that many creatures considering how many are in the games. But the creatures that do appear, I think, look really really good. And obviously, just the landscape is pretty insane as well. Like, just how deserted everything looks, how run down the towns are. Like, that first town, like, what is it, Philly? Philly is like the first town where, like, all the characters are together. That looks really awesome. Like, it looks like a real rundown town. Kind of gives me like Megaton vibes in regards to like how you just put together everything is, in a kind of, or like how bootleg put together everything is.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I thought that stuff was great. I thought the entire I thought it looked beautiful.
It looked good. Like, yeah, no, there was never a point where I was like, oh, like, what, like, but it felt like a natural evolution of the world. I was just it almost went from like game to like a realistic, like 8K graphic Fallout 5. I felt I was watching, and it was just, I was like, damn, like there was never a point where I was kind of like, oh, all right, well, I guess I'll have to put up with that because it's a show. But no, I was like little references here, like. Every time, I feel like the game was listening to me. Or not the game, the show was listening to me. Because every time I would make a reference to my friend Jared and say, oh, I wonder if they'll have this item from the game. Like the rocket launcher where it shoots anything. The guy has it and he like shoots. I forget what he shoots. It's the scene in the graveyard where they find the ghoul. But he shoots something with it. And I'm like, oh, that's the gun. That's the gun right there. And then Lucy sees a junk jet on the shelf.
Yeah. Oh, junk jet gets used in like the first episode.
Yeah, and then the other time it happened was a scene where someone's hacking someone's computer in a vault, and it comes up with the password attempts in the game, and I was like, yo, like that. I was like, it was
like, that's really kind of like that's the care that you put into the game, that you put something like that in, like photorealistic. Same with the Pip-Boys looked identical. The when Maximus is in the power armor, his HUD is the Fallout 4 HUD. Like, it's just over his face. Like, it's literally the exact same HUD as what it is in the game.
Or when Lucy's going to, like, when she goes to a location, like, you can, on her Pip-Boy, she can drop locations. It's like, you've arrived at your destination, like, just like in the game, like, setting a marker and then, like, going to it. So it's like, oh, like, this technology really is used in this manner. Yeah.
Well, there's a moment where she's trying to find something, and she's like, "Oh, I put a tracker on it," and she used her Pip-Boy for that. And I'm like, "That's something you can do in the game. Like, you can track like certain things, like on a waypoint or whatever." Again, all that stuff's really awesome. All the sound effects are very loyal to the game. Like, the Pip-Boy noises, the vault noises, the terminal noises, all that stuff is very kind of came straight from the game. Even like when people are taking like Jet or Psycho or Stimpaks, it's the exact same noises as what they do. Like, whenever because the ghoul has to take one of the changes, by the way, in the show, this isn't a spoiler, but ghouls basically evolve now. So it's almost like, I compared it to Dead Rising, funnily enough, because in Dead Rising, if you get bit, unless you take I can't remember what the medication is now. Zombie X, I think it's called, maybe, or Zombex. That's what it's called. Unless you take Zombex, you'll become a zombie. The ghoul is basically on the hunt for like vials that will keep him human.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you remember, The ghoul is like the only because it keeps on cutting back to 2077. This isn't a spoiler because you find out in the first episode. The ghoul lived when the bombs fell, so he's been around for over 200
Yeah, that guy's
years.
been living there for a long fucking time.
Yeah, and the reason why he's still alive is because he keeps on taking these vials that keep him human. But you get to see what it's like when you can't take when you're not in any position to take vials, and there are kind of half human, half ghouls, which are pretty cool. I think you kind of see them in the games, but like they explore it a bit more in the show, which I really appreciate. And then obviously you have the feral ghouls who are just there's no hope for them essentially, and they're gonna like try and eat anything and anyone that's near them. Um, but yeah, even I thought that stuff was pretty awesome, and he kind of needs to take the medication for that. But yeah, speaking of kind of noises and stuff that are consistent, we got to talk about the soundtrack. Basically, the Fallout music. Oh, I just love it. It's so easy to do because all that old music's pretty. I imagine a lot of it's like royalty free, so it's probably very easy to like use it in the show. But again, attention to detail. Basically, ending every episode with a song from the games. I thought was really good. I was singing along to a lot of them because when you listen to the radio, they're very flippin', they're very common whenever you hear them.
Yeah, there
So
were so many iconic songs from Galaxy News Radio. I was like, yep, yep. I was just like, it keeps you in the lore of the universe, just continuing to hammer that point over and over again. I was just like, yeah, yeah. No, like, again, like it goes along with what I was saying with the technology and all the different, like the way it works. Like there was never a point where I was like, that's not how that worked in the game. Like, oh, they did that better in the game than they did this.
yeah,
Like they stuck to it. Like they like it was such a great application of it. And it makes you wonder for other mediums that don't do this, it's like this is possible. Like look at this product as to this you can do this to give some fan service, but to also do it your own way. Like and to give other actors and stories time to shine. Like there is a way to do it both ways. This is why fans get mad when something's not adapted properly or something's changed for no reason because this is a perfect example of a way it can be done that's satisfactory, right?
yeah, and like I would say that despite all the kind of fan service and stuff I kind of appreciated, one or two of the kind of little criticisms I do have, just while we're kind of talking about these kind of things, is that like when it comes to like the world building stuff, like I really did appreciate kind of how good the world looked, but it did seem a little inconsistent. Like if you remember, like in episode 1 or 2, I think it's episode 2, the Brotherhood are in like a forest almost, and there's an attack basically with one of the Brotherhood knights, and then basically they leave the forest after the attack, and then like next thing you know he's in like the desert, and like I don't know where the hell like what's the flipping like climate of that like how is there just like because the forest is like covered in trees and like vegetation and stuff, and then all of a sudden you're just in like like at least the Fallout games are quite consistent with that, or like you need to travel quite a fair distance for that. It
You
just
know,
seemed
they
kind of
never mentioned this, but there, if you, they never mentioned this technology, and I thought it was going to be mentioned, but they could, it might get mentioned down the road. The Gek, the Garden of Eden
yeah,
creation
yeah,
kick, where it could make these pockets, because this is in Fallout 3. Remember those tree people in Fallout 3, where it's a forest that's like secluded in like a rock. Like this is, and that's how they turn the water purified in Fallout 3. Like it's this I don't know how the technology is used, but it's like some type of like crazy technology that like can change things like the biology of something. It like changes it. So I don't know if that happened in that section. I mean, they didn't go into it, but like, you only have so much screen time to kind of go into
yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of premise of like another thing that's never brought up, which I was going to mention is behind my second criticism. Oh, I was also going to mention about the world building. It does feel quite small as well because like characters keep on bumping into each other. Even side characters keep on like recurring, and I'm like, how small is this world that people keep on running into each other? Like it's just like that's something I'm just like if you're trying to because you can't have your cake and eat it. You can't show like a gigantic wasteland and then have like the same characters pop up like 3 times in the episode.
I
So
would
kind of like
defend that on two things. Like, as only someone like slightly disagreeing with it, it's the fact that you don't want to show 1,000 locations because yes, in Fallout 3 and 4, if you go to every location in the game, there's like a zillion on your map, and it's like okay, that works in an RPG that's like 80 hours plus long, but in a show you want to like especially for any newcomers, like these are the main locations. We've got, like, in the past, these are the locations we want to talk about. In the present, these are the locations we want to talk about. And everyone is going after the same goal. The main goal is that chip that's in the Enclave remnant scientist's neck, which then turns into his head when they chop his head off. And so that main goal,
second episode.
yeah, that main goal keeps everyone like bumping because like they're all trying to find it, and they knew it was in this last location, and they're trying to go here. Like that's mostly centralizing everyone.
I think it's more just like the characters that they run into. Like I would have rather had like new people in. Like there is quite a lot of different characters in it, and we will talk about some of them in like a later segment in this. But there's just a couple of like people that I kind of wish like, oh, I wish there was like a different person. Just because I would compare it to like Game of Thrones, for example. Like the first season of that. Like, to be fair, I'll compare it to the first season only. Whenever I watched that first season, I remember thinking like there's a lot of different characters in this. And I understand obviously there's like 5 different factions going on there as opposed to like the 3 that we're dealing with here. But it still felt like just in a world building premise, it did feel like there was more people and stuff to like going around that, you know, what it didn't feel as small as like the Fallout series did. But again, that's something that I imagine will be improved as kind of time progresses, the budget increases, I'm sure. You know, all that stuff will basically change. So you mentioned briefly there about the kind of characters, like just an overview of them. But I think maybe the last thing we can talk about, like, you know, non-spoiler wise, because this will probably lead into spoilers, to be honest, is the characters themselves. So I guess we'll talk about the 3 protagonists, and then we'll talk about kind of the side characters that come up quite a fair bit as well in the show. So I guess we might as well start off with the main person, like it's her story, after all, in the show. And that is Lucy, who is played by Ella Purnell. Something actually is that out of the 3 mains, there only is one real recognizable actor in it, and even then, like he's one of those kind of actors that's, you know, kind of on the outskirts. But the other 2, like these 2 lead actors, are relative unknowns. So Ella Purnell plays Lucy. She's only really been in like Army of the Dead, I think she was in. She's in like 1 or 2 other like shows.
Yeah, she's in like a thriller show called Yellow Jackets, which was kind of, she was like the lead in that show, but that was really, she got like a Rising Star Award for this series, for the Fallout series, because this is like, this basically put her on the map, so.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like these kind of shows that maybe have 1 or 2 established actors and then introduce like a lot of people that become big. Like the one I can think of off the top of my head that was quite recent is Ozark. Obviously, you know, Jason Bateman, Laura Linney's in it, but
what about Game of Thrones? Any of those, like Kit Harington? I mean, like anyone.
I completely missing out on that. Yeah. Like, Sean Bean was like the main guy in that, and you could argue with Peter Dinklage as well. Lena Headey was quite famous before that, but yeah, like everyone else in that show, like Kit Harington, as you say, all the kids basically were relative unknowns. But yeah, they're basically doing a similar thing with this show where like they have the IP is established. They have 1 or 2 actors. You know, they have 1 main actor and then a couple of the side actors, or you know, the characters have played like, you know, one-off characters. They're quite famous. But yeah, Ella Purnell plays the main protagonist, and I think she's really good. Being honest, like I think she was like this kind of show. Like you kind of mix or breaks when the main character isn't like that good. But I feel like, you know, for a completely original character, I thought she did really well. She kind of gave away the naivete of the Vault Dweller. Like she kind of gave off those vibes very, very well, especially in the early stages. Shout outs, by the way, to another person that doesn't swear. We love to see it. She doesn't swear at all in the show because obviously the Vault Dwellers are like, oh, okie dokie.
Yeah,
no,
yeah. They have like the golden rule she talks about doing well on like she has just such complete naivete of how like the world is supposed to work. And she sells it off really well of like, but then someone who molds, because as she, especially her encounter in the Super Duper Mart, like, you know, that would be like your main quest leveling up if this was the video game. You know, she kind of comes out of that a little battle hardened, you know, like there's definitely
stuff.
Yeah,
you know, survived something quite traumatic, you know, like she's obviously I mean, you could also argue as well, like her having to cut off you mentioned earlier, her having to cut off the Enclave scientist's head, that's another kind of big thing for her, because, you know, she has to mutilate a body essentially. But yeah, I think she knows that quite well. You know, she kind of goes over, she kind of becomes a bit battle hardened, but she doesn't become like cold blooded, which I kind of like. Like even towards the end of the show, which we won't get into just yet, but even towards the end of the show, like she does become a lot more battle hardened, but she isn't like heartless. You know, she still predominantly, you know, wants to be the better person. Like I said earlier, the good karma option. She still wants to be a good person at the end of the day, even if it means having to play by the Wasteland's rules, which are completely different from hers. But yeah, I thought she's really good. Very pretty, I will say as well. Like I don't know, that just helps with a show like this, you know, like
Yeah,
the
it's
fact
it's
that
nice to have a nice face to look at when you're in the wasteland and stuff. And I mean, you contrast, and they use the term the smooth skin, and I was like, oh, feral ghouls do call the humans that. And
yeah,
I was, because yeah, you see like this pristine, like you know she's got like lipstick, big eyes, like I'm just like, where'd this person walk out of? Like a freaking
stuff.
time capsule? And in some cases with the vaults, yes, literally a time capsule. So
Yeah, they have that comparison scene in episode 2 where she walks into the shop and that old lady is there and she looks like she's like 150 years old, basically. And then she's like laughing at her because she obviously walks up to her being like, I'm looking for kind of information and I'm trying to find my father. And basically, the girl, the woman's laughs at her being like, you're not going to survive like 3 seconds in here unless you like harden up. Um, so yeah, she don't like, but I think she kind of pulls off that really, really well. And I think the emotional scenes when she needs to be emotional are kind of very good. Like I thought her action scenes were quite good as well. I thought she was quite, she pulled off that stuff quite convincingly, like convincingly in the way that like she did look as if she wasn't very comfortable with like the guns or live life like the wasteland, but she does it anyway. And I thought she's really good. This is the kind of show that like if she keeps doing it like that, she could end up being, we may end up seeing her a fair bit more in like other shows and movies and stuff, you know. But all in all, really enjoyed her. She's basically the glue that keeps this whole show together, for being honest. Like, because her story, if she was very bad in the show, then the show would not have worked really,
yep.
because you're following her for the entire time. Aaron Moten, I believe is his name. He plays Maximus. Again, a relative unknown. He's been in even less than Ella Purnell, so he really is just came out of nowhere. I thought he was good. I don't think he was as good as Ella Purnell acting wise, but I feel like he didn't really have as much to do. Like because he's like the neutral option, he's very conflicted a lot
It's
of the time.
funny, his face looked neutral for so much of this. There
Yeah,
were so many times where he's just like those big lips and he's just kind of like, the only times where like when he's in the vault and he's like, wow, like this is awesome. Like I was seeing him, emote more. But yeah, there are times where like the kid version that they keep flashing to seems to emote more than he does. And
yeah.
I'm like, come on, man, like dig in there. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I thought it was okay. He's got a couple more like scenes of him like lashing out and stuff because like he maybe goes through some more like traumatic stuff than Lucy does in the show. Because obviously he witnesses a lot more death and destruction in the show, being a Brotherhood of Steel member. And yeah, like I think he does a decent enough job. Again, he doesn't really have as much to work with. I think out of the 3 stories, his is probably the one I was the least engaged in. But that's not really a spite. That's more in praise of the other 2 stories, essentially. But yeah, do you have any other kind of thoughts on him, his character, his kind of performance?
Yeah, no, I thought this is the ghoul or this is Maximus.
Oh, yeah, well, I was just any final thoughts about the Maximus
No,
actor?
I thought that as it got deeper into the series, like I got to see more of his character. I thought during the early parts, like I was trying to, I guess it took longer for me to connect with him than it did Lucy, because I guess Lucy is like almost meant to be us in a sense. Like we're naive, and especially if you've never seen Fallout, you're naive to this crazy ass world. And if you're just in the vaults where it's like, oh, this is awesome, and another day at the office, then you get outside and it's like, what the what's going on here? So maybe it's easier to identify with her. Maximus, you got to spend some time with him to get to that point, right?
Yeah. He has his own motives and stuff, but again, I don't think his motives are as engaging as the other 2 characters. And yeah, the only really established actor in this show is Walton Goggins, who plays the Ghoul. Really good. I think he maybe is my favorite performance in the show because he's got to kind of do 2 things because he's also in a lot of the flashbacks. Well, basically the flashbacks are his story essentially, like how his life was before the war. But yeah, and then he also obviously plays the Ghoul, who's a lot more kind of battle hardened. He cares a lot less. Like I said, the bad karma the bad karma option. Like he doesn't really care about anyone but himself, especially in the early parts of the show. I thought Walton Goggins was really, really good. Really enjoyed him in the show. He was kind of like the cherry on top. He kind of is like the Peter Dinklage, I would say, of the show, where like he's not in like a lot of the scenes, but when he is, like he's the best part of it, in my opinion.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I thought he was really awesome, and I think actually the Ghoul makeup was really, really good as well. Like, kind of a slight side note there, but I think you could have made it look a lot worse. But if I had to go to look at him a lot with his kind of orange skin and his like nose just basically falling off, like I thought it was really kind of awesome. So I thought he did really, really well. big thumbs up. He had a lot of emotions as well because his character, especially in the flashbacks, goes through quite a lot. You know,
Hmm.
whereas like his wasteland version is very like the ghoul, basically his persona. That's a lot more kind of like not a lot really happens to him like emotionally for him to
Well, the
really.
Ghoul's story connects to the entirety of like the what's really going on in this universe, right?
Yeah.
Like he's at the forefront, like having been an actor. I guess spoiler to his likeness being used in some of the
Yeah.
promotional stuff for Vault
Yeah,
Tech.
like
Like,
as an actor, he gets kind of hired to be like the Vault-Tec
yeah,
advertisement,
and
basically.
it's you
Like,
never guess it. Like I knew when we saw his character, I was like, "There's some," like from seeing the first scene where the bombs go off and then seeing the Ghoul. I'm like, "Oh, it's the same person." Like I'm curious to see what his backstory is, but then I'm like, "Man, it is a lot more integrated to the plot of this
yeah.
whole universe than I thought." Like I was like, "Damn."
So there's a couple more side characters I want to talk about, and then we can go into the full spoiler section about and talk more about the characters and their full kind of story arcs for this season. Got to give a shout out to I think it's either Moses or Moises Aries, who plays Norm, who is Lucy's brother. He is basically he's basically the Vault side plot of the series. It's him and a guy called Chet, Dave Register, which is a really mad surname. But anyway, basically he Norm is like he's kind of like witnessing the aftermath of the Raider attack, and he's essentially trying to figure out kind of how he's been trying to figure out what really happened because he understands that there's something else going on in the vault, and he basically discovers all that stuff. I thought he was pretty good in the show. A lot of people seem to really like him as well. I thought it was all right. I didn't really think too much about him. Like he kind of goes through a character arc of like he was a coward because Lucy offers for him to come with her, and he says no because I'm a coward, and he slowly kind of comes out of a shell and becomes more of a explorative character. And yeah, I thought he was pretty good in it. Got to give a shout out to Cal McLaughlin who plays Hank, who is the dad who gets kidnapped. I just love him in Twin Peaks, to be honest. Like he played like basically Twin Peaks. He plays my all-time favorite TV show character, who is Dale Cooper from Twin Peaks. So seeing him come up in the show was amazing, especially being such a kind of pivotal character in the show. Really enjoyed him. I thought he kind of had that fatherly love kind of bond in the first episode. He portrayed that really, really well. And I guess the final character I want to talk about is Sarita Chowdhury, who plays Moldava, or Moldava, I think her name is. She's basically the main raider who kidnaps Hank in the first place. And I think she's pretty good as well. She's not in it too often, but I think she did pretty good because, and I guess this is the moment we're going to get into spoilers. So, spoiler alert at this point for the rest of the video, because a lot of these characters have more strings to their bow. Isn't that right, Chris? Like a couple of these characters are not quite what they seem
Oh
at
yes,
first.
especially I don't know if this just got called out in your breakdown. Did you mention the wife, his freaking friend?
Well, you were trying so hard to not mention it there.
Yeah,
And you
that
mentioned
wife, dude. I was like, oh, she's just like, oh, it's the nuclear. Because, like, again, this is so 1950s esque. It's the nuclear family of America. The wife is the house mom in the kitchen, and the men go
yeah.
out to do the work. And secretly, and then was it casually mentioned, oh, she works for Vault-Tec. And the ghoul has the option of, or Cooper has the option of like spying on her conversations at one point. He even feels right. Else feels wrong, but then when he actually does, I'm like, this. So can I just give the biggest spoiler plot point that's revealed in this TV series, which I had a hunch that this was what happened.
Yeah, a lot of people said this was potentially what actually happened.
Yeah, because in your breakdown in the beginning of this video, you talked about like the premise of Fallout. The thing you didn't mention was it was a war with communist China was what was pushing. They were trying to, because if you remember, all the cars are powered by like nuclear power. That's why in
Yeah.
Fallout 3 and 4 when you blow up a car, it looks like a nuke because it's like nuclear fusion in it. So, it's a race for resources between communist China and America, and when they start to push into Chinese territory, the thought is that the Chinese hit the panic button and nuke America, and then we nuke them, and everyone just nukes each other. You know, almost like Terminator 3 at the end of that movie, where everyone just fucking nukes each other.
There are two main theories behind what actually started the Great War. That was the first one, and the second one is the one that gets kind of revealed in the show.
Yeah, so in the show, it's revealed that fucking Vault-Tec nuked
themselves,
themselves.
basically.
And it's
Yeah.
not like it's believable because we talked earlier about how all these vaults have experimentations and they're all trying to do different things, whether it's creating, super soldiers or
Well, ironically, they mentioned some of the vaults that are in the games are mentioned in that roundtable, like the war room kind of segments.
Yep.
Like
I think the super mutant Vault 87 gets mentioned, doesn't
it
it?
does, yeah. Someone says, "Oh, what if we try and build superhuman soldiers
Yup.
using like
Yep.
experimentation?"
Because the two main enemies in my mind that are not in the series, which I think will definitely be in the second season, were the super mutants and the Death Claws. Those were like the two enemies that like weren't in the game. Or not
Both of them get kind of wink. Like there's a wee wink towards both of them in the final episode. The
Yeah.
superhuman, and then the Deathclaw skull is at the very, very end of the show.
I like the fact that they didn't put them in it. My friend Jared was like, "Where's the Death Claw? I really want to see a
Yeah, I
Death
think a
Claw."
lot of people thought that initially, like, why was
Right,
it?
but here's the thing. There are so many enemies, like we said, so many enemies, weapons, factions, etc., etc., etc. Like, the fact that you can do multiple seasons with this now, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, why go to the buffet and try to eat every item all at once? Like, we showed you the ghouls, we showed you a freaking Yao guy, we showed you some of the water
Labyrinth.
monsters, but now
The
there's more. There's more we haven't shown you, but like that's because what if there's a super mutant who can talk who becomes a main character in season 2, right? Like you don't want to just show them as like the guys who hang those blood sacks from like doors and stuff.
Yeah.
And like there's the bad ones and then there's some of the good ones that are in Fallout 3, like Fox, and then there's one I forget the name of the one.
Lilith or Lilith?
Yeah,
or...
yeah. There's good ones that are almost like the ghouls. They have their sanity, and then the ones that have lost their sanity are the ones that are just enemies.
But again, I'm with you. I don't really think they needed to include that stuff. Like the Deathclaw, I consider the Deathclaw similar to like the dragons in Game of Thrones. Like they're such a big threat that you don't need to really mention that much. And like it's almost better to not show them and then have like a scene. Because I thought whenever I was watching the show, I was like, they're either going to never use them at all, or they're going to use them in like the last episode. But I wouldn't know when they would use them. And a Deathclaw would show up and just flip and obliterate something.
It's going
And
to be
so
in season
exciting for
2. So the spoiler, I guess, is that in the final scene of season 1, there's a Deathclaw skull, which very clearly foreshadows that there's going to be. They're going to be.
It couldn't be anything else. Like it was
Yeah,
obviously-
exactly. They're like, yep, they're and the other spoiler from the end of that first scene is that the dad goes to New Vegas. So and we know that there's if you've gone to the quarry in Fallout New Vegas, you've played the game. Tell me how many Deathclaws you see there. There's a lot of them.
So yeah, it makes sense for like that stuff to be kind of hinted at. But yeah, as the story progresses, you kind of discover all these twists. You discover that Cooper's wife, I don't remember.
Yeah, that was my main point. That the wife, who seemed to be this like model of American excellence, was actually the one who like was in with Vault-Tec pitching the idea of blowing up humanity. So and it's this supremacy thing of like they want to be the key survivors that kind of come out of this. And
that's what inspires the creations of Vault 31, 32, and 33. That kind of mindset.
Yeah.
Because then it's revealed, both through Norm's story and through the flashback sequence, that they're basically making a 3-vault kind of triad, and one of the vaults is going to store Vault-Tec kind of executives who they consider to be kind of the best of humanity. They're going to cryo-freeze them, like Fallout 4, cryo-freeze them, and then Vaults 32 and 33 are going to house kind of upstanding citizens, and then slowly the members from Vault 31 will be cryogenically unfrozen, and then they will integrate themselves with the vaults. And basically, they're wanting Vault-Tec to be the future. And by basically housing these 3 vaults, they were going to try and repopulate the world in like their image. It was kind of like genocide, or like what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like supremacy almost. Like they're trying to become like a supreme nation of humans by doing it in this way, and you kind of get
and they felt like the only way was to just let the world kind of die off and pick itself off, and
this is where the twists were coming thick and thin, because then you discover that Hank, real name Henry, Lucy's dad, is actually one of those Vault-Tec executives, because he was alive also during before the bombs fell.
And we had seen this concept in Fallout 4 with the cryo freeze, because you're in one of those cryo freeze containers when you get your son stolen from you. So like that
Vault 111, I think that
was Vault 111, the sense of preserving people through that methodology was shown in 4. So there's a scene when one of the side characters that's still in. I love that side plot, by the way. Like the fact that it could diverge. It's like, here's our three characters. I'm like, okay, we'll just follow their story. They bump into each other. There's stuff going on. That's what we got.
Yeah.
The fact that there was still other stuff that we got that was like in addition to, like, I'm talking the flashbacks, yes, but the stuff still going on in the vault. Like even after Lucy left, there was still some messed up stuff, which then it does connect. Like just the attention to detail and the care about how this story is mapped out. Like you can tell Todd Howard, the team, like I so appreciate this, like as a writer myself, like when someone can look at a universe and like take the puzzle pieces and say like that goes there, like don't force a piece that's not supposed to be somewhere. Like if it's already laid out, like I'm looking, it was so cool because someone pulled up a list that the vaults that were added in this TV show do not conflict with any of the vaults that are in Fallout's 1 and 2.
Yeah.
That like the numbers, like you can look at all the numbers, they don't conflict. Like even those old vaults, like this is just in addition to, so it's almost like Todd Howard, the team, were like, nope, we've already used those vaults. We've already used these.
Yeah. Even like the premise as well, because there's 4 different vaults. Technically, 3 of them are all interconnected, but there's another vault, Vault 4. None of them have like a premise that's been done before either. Like they all have different experiments that have been. Because it must be very hard making a Fallout game and think of a brand new premise for every single new vault you're going to put in the game. But yeah, they made sure to kind of make sure there was no interweaving there. And I also kind of liked, in a similar vein to what you're talking about, I really liked how they structured it, like how every episode that new piece was being discovered. So like, all right, so initially it's a spoiler. Well, became a spoiler. We're in the spoiler section. So it wasn't Raiders that came to capture Hank. Hank was captured by Moldova, who also was someone that lived before the Great War. That's the one kind of plot hole I will say. I'll let you sit on this. I'm going to continue my thought. I'll let you sit on this. She's the only person I can't really understand how she survived, because that would make her over 200 years old. Because, you know, that's 200 years. Like, she was in those, like, flashbacks as well. Because she has meetings with Cooper where she's trying to talk about how bad Vault-Tec is. So she obviously somehow survives for 200 years. Maybe she freezes herself as well. I don't know how she'd have that technology. But either way, that's never explored. She basically kidnaps Hank because of his experiences in Shady Spring, or Shady Sands, or whatever the place is called. Yeah. She basically kidnaps him because he's a Vault-Tec employee, and she needs him to basically use what was the whole point of the Enclave's head, which is that I'm going in a lot of different tangents here, but the Enclave scientist implanted inside him something called cold fusion, which is basically infinite energy, which we've seen before in media. Hell, Chris has written a book where there is a infinite energy artifact in it. Like, it's not something that hasn't been done before. Fun fact though about cold fusion is it is a real life thing. Like, it is a real life theoretical possibility. Like what they kind of talk about. So at least that's kind of going for it. But she needs him to basically put in the key to activate it because it's a Vault-Tec creation. Anyway, while all this is going on, you discover that Moldova basically invaded Vault 32, but they initially think that they killed the residents of Vault 32, when in actuality, everyone had already died there because they discovered what was going on with Vault 31. So they basically killed the overseer, who would have been a Vault 31 Vault-Tec employee, and then obviously murdered themselves or killed themselves or did whatever, basically tried to break into the vault, because whenever Norm goes to the door of Vault 31, there's like corpses all over the place because they're obviously trying to break into the vault. Maybe because they knew there was cryo chambers in there and they knew they couldn't die, or they wanted to kill everyone else that was in there. Who knows? But that was all kind of spaced out over the span of like 8 episodes. Like, there was one episode where one of the Raiders / NCR people basically says, "Oh, those guys, like, we're not the murderers you think we are." That puts the seed in Norm's head. Then he reads like the terminal about kind of what happened in there. Then again, he kind of discovers that something's weird about like why they're trying to repopulate Vault 32 again. And it's because like Betty, who's one of the new overseer, she's basically one of the Vault-Tec employees from 200 years ago. So all that stuff kind of gets put into the show like in little chunks over the course of the episodes, which I really did like. It didn't just all kind of split. It wasn't like a one episode thing. It was all kind of done, and as you said, with a lot of other plot points in the show, it all kind of runs parallel with what else was going on. Because at the same time, you discover more about Shady Sands, which I may go into at some point in the show. That's the one point of contention that old Fallout fans are not happy with, like the Shady Sands timeline. And also, because who is it? Maximus has a past of it, because basically Hank nukes Shady Sands because Lucy's mother, who is always like kind of you're not really too sure where she is for a lot of the show. Come to find out, she discovered what happened in the vaults, left with her children, went to Shady Sands, which at that point was an NCR stronghold. It was actually the capital for the NCR, and she meets Moldava, and I think it's kind of implied that they had a relationship because the Lucy's mom is actually there. I think her name's Rose. I think she's a ghoul. She's a really heavily radiated ghoul, and she's like at the observatory with Moldava.
Yeah,
So I
that
think
scene was that scene was messed up. Originally, I didn't know who the ghoul was, and I'm like, oh shit, it's the mom. Yeah.
yeah, all kind of comes together. It's crazy. And then yeah, so basically she's you discover all that stuff as well, like how that all intertwines. Because Maximus has a past with Shady Sands, and then obviously Cooper or the ghoul at that point drops the line to Hank, being like, "Where's my family?" Implying that Hank knows. Basically, implies that like Cooper's family is still out there. Maybe they're in a vault somewhere. Maybe they're in some radiated town, but the ghoul is still hunting for them essentially.
Well,
And
see, this is where I want to know where, like, what was the plan for the high level Vault-Tec employees? Because I'm guessing she's somewhere that's like super well off, and there's a few theories which, again, like if you know like the early games like Fallout's 1 and 2, there's a place called, it's either Vault Zero or Vault City, which is like a place for, yeah, it's for all of like the wealthiest of Vault-Tec that we're gonna try to rebuild. And I looked it up, and in the Wikipedia, Vault City is a high-tech settlement in northern Nevada in Fallout 2.
yeah.
Where was Hank going when he was?
Well, actually, I'm glad you say this. One of the biggest like reveals, which is actually went so under the radar, I didn't even notice it the first time. I'm gonna send you something on Facebook here. I'm gonna send you a picture of someone. Basically, during that roundtable discussion, you don't really know anyone else there aside from like Barb, but someone pipes up with a mustache who his nameplate in front of him says Robert House. So Mr. House is canonically in the show. He's the only character from like the games that is canonically in the show.
Wait, that's the same Mr. House?
Yeah, so so Robert House is in that show, and he's because he makes a reference to his casinos in New Vegas. And if you remember New Vegas, Mr. House was cryogenically frozen in the heart of his 10 penny not 10 penny tower, his like casino essentially. He's like cryogenically frozen. So it's implied and that's in Nevada. It's implied that that's maybe where the Vault-Tec associates went, like the higher ups. Maybe they're hiding in Nevada somewhere, and that's why Hanks went there. You know, but this is where the confusion comes in. Now, again, we'll talk about this probably in the what to expect later on section. But this is now where you need to decide, because following New Vegas, the events of New Vegas have taken place. So it's presumed that Mr. House is dead because Mr. House dies in every ending except for the house ending. So unless they're going to canonically go for the house ending, then the New Vegas trip will be under the command of either the NCR, which is highly doubtful because it's implied that they were kind of destroyed by the Brotherhood through Shady Sands and all that. The Caesar's Legion, who I really doubt because they're not even mentioned in the show. The Brotherhood of Steel, which is probably the most likely option. Or the courier himself, if you remember the.
I'm wondering if we're gonna get but I don't know how they would do that. Like, it would be cool if they. Now, the concept of the courier was shown in a couple of episodes. Like I think there was one that was living in a little house, and the ghoul looks for information from one. But I don't know if having any characters from the previous games, that would be sick if they did it.
Yeah, protagonist would be pretty crazy. Yeah, but again,
now I didn't know that about Mr. House. I'm learning that now. I did not realize that.
Yeah, that's the one thing. So Mr. House was on the committee to drop the bombs, and obviously Mr. House in New Vegas is very very kind of old.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like in an Illuminati group that's trying to destroy the world so they can shape it into their own vision later on.
Yeah, and obviously Mr. House wants to own the New Vegas Strip, which he does at that point. And obviously, he's just making kind of bank living forever in his computer. Obviously, unless he's already dead, in which case, that's it. But yeah, so that's basically the big thing that happens in the show. That's the kind of big reveal. Is all that stuff happens. Like I said, the ghoul kind of becomes slightly nicer. Maximus kind of stays the same. You can't really tell whether he's going to be good or bad. You think he's still going to be good. He does have a smooch with Lucy, which I'm sure Chris punched his television when he saw that scene. But anyway, and then Fallout 4, Vault 4, sorry, I want to talk about briefly. Vault 4 is basically a kind of like genetic modification vault, essentially. I didn't really get too much of what happens in it. You also get a couple of you get a couple of side characters that are just in that, like Chris Parnell is the overseer in that. He was in SNL. He plays Jerry in Rick and Morty. He's in quite a lot of other stuff. A couple of other kind of characters. Sorry, I want to mention a couple of other.
Oh, that's where I recognized him from. I was like, where the hell that?
Yeah, well, you recognize his voice. He only has one eye.
Yeah.
It was, by the way, state of those. I did say the effects were generally quite good. I hated the effects they did on his one eye. I think it looked so bad. I don't know why.
I mean, that was kind of like, it didn't take away too much. It was just, again, like they had some of these little side things, but again, like it didn't take away, like nothing took away from the general like overall enjoyment of the show.
Anyway, sorry. So you got him. There was Michael Rappaport is in it. Like he plays actually the knight that dies that Maximus takes the armor from.
Oh, that's who that. Dude, there were so many actors where I'm like, I know who that is, but who the heck is it? Yeah.
Matt Berry as the voice of the Surf Boss is so good. That's so genius. And then obviously he appears in the flesh in the flashbacks. Matt Berry,
the Mr. Gutsy bots.
So I think him being the voice is really, really good. Who else? Fred Armisen just turns up. He's like a radio DJ guy who's in like one scene. That's pretty awesome. He just shows up. I would have liked to have seen more of him actually. I kind of missed not having like a radio DJ in the show. Like,
it was brief. Like there was a sequence where he's walking up to the establishment. I'm like, oh, people can play the music on their Pip-Boys just like the game. Like that's.
I also kind of liked, by the way, the kind of nod to. I guess it's either Agatha or the Minutemen. Like I think people have been kind of debating which one it is because they're talking about the violin music and like if you remember Agatha in Fallout 3, whenever she gets her violin, she has a radio station where she just plays the violin. And I'm pretty sure the Minutemen also play the violin in their station when they're not flipping telling you a new settlement is being attacked. But yeah, I kind of like that little nod there. But anyway, all those actors are pretty good. Fallout 4, I keep saying Fallout 4. Vault 4 had that weird cultish thing, like calling Moldava the Flame Mother. I didn't really get that, if I'm being honest. Like, I wasn't really sold on.
Are these some of your major complaints with the series? Like, what are some things that are like your major call-outs of like, oh, I didn't like that? Like, what distracted from the series and it being enjoyable?
I'll tell you my biggest complaint, actually. Now that we were in the spoiler section, I think the Hank reveal was too predictable. I kind of knew, because I've played Fallout before. In every Fallout game, when you've hunted for your parent, they're hiding something from you. They're actually not what they seem. Like, it's been done to death, and you would have thought...
Well, the Fallout 3 one, it actually ended up being true. He's like, I was trying to do Project Purity. So that was, like, the good version of it. This is the bad version, right?
The bad version is your son is in the head of a flipping institute, and, he's also much older than you.
But I guess that's the inverse. It's his son. Yeah.
But in this game, again, they had another, like, because whenever Hank disappeared, I was like, I bet you this is set up. And it basically was. I mean, it wasn't a setup by the two of them. I initially thought they were both in cahoots. Obviously, come to find out, she hates his guts because she basically killed him, or he basically killed her like lover potentially, and just by being a Vault-Tec employee in general. And she obviously hated everything about Vault-Tec. I didn't really like that just because it was so predictable, like that kind of stuff. Ironically, I wasn't really as big a fan of everything like interconnecting. Like it was almost too. It was kind of like what I was saying about the world building thing feeling a bit small. The fact that everything tied together, like all three characters had like an involvement with like this plot. I understand in like a narrative standpoint, it kind of seems nice, but I think if you're making a world this big, it makes everything feel quite small. It reminds me of Star Wars in a way, where like every bad thing that happens in Star Wars, all like is connected to like the same family or the same race or the same force, or like just like you think for the vast expanses of space, you can spread it out a bit more. What else? I think some of the humor felt a little out of place. Like I know Fallout has humorous moments, but kind of like what I was referring to about Vault 4, I think Vault 4 was a bit too silly. Like, I banish you to get sent back up to the surface, and you're like
that one. I was surprised because I thought, well, the thing is, if you wanted to change that scene, you could have just had Maximus show up a few minutes earlier, because he ends up showing up and he's like, "Get away from her," and it's a comedic because they just starts throwing
and they all run away and stuff,
and she's like, "But they were gonna let me go." He's like, "Oh, okay." But like, if you wanted the inverse where they were gonna kill her, like he would have shown up in time to like
have one or the other. Don't do both,
Yeah.
And also actually, while you reminded me of that, Maximus changes heart so flipping quickly in that episode. I really didn't like it.
Yeah, I didn't didn't like his quick, like, wow, the vaults are amazing, and I don't need to go back to the surface to be a brotherhood. Like, that I didn't like. I was like, there's still the bigger mission at hand. Like, why are you getting, like, I understand the allure of this, like, society where you've got all these amenities and, like, you know, water.
Like within
and
2 hours, he's like, "Oh, I'm never leaving," and
yeah, he's just like stuck there. And then Lucy's the one that's like, "Hey, there's something fucked up here. We need to go." And he's like, "No."
Like I don't mind the shoe on the other foot thing they're going for, but it's far like they're both well. Lucy's one makes sense. He's far too in on like, oh, I want to stay in the vault. And also, by the way, did you hear what he said whenever she came in? She came in and he was like, "Do you want my dick to explode? I mean, do you want to have ink intercourse?" And I'm like, what? Like, why would you say that? They don't even
I also was
that.
like, how does this bro not understand the concept of, like, you know, like, masturbation is like such a like I don't think the apocalypse took away the understanding of like what that is. Like, maybe I think like the Brotherhood, a lot of members are celibate, so maybe that's a piece of it. Like, you know, almost like, you know, Jedi in Star Wars, like they're the knights of the wasteland. Like, oh, we must be, you know, our mission is to defend and serve. Like, we can't, you know. So
we have a few more minutes left in this segment of the call, but do you have anything like majorly critical? I know I'm a bit more critical about the show than you are. I think
I yeah, and because I just appreciate what they did. I think like those things actually you called out. Like, I didn't mind a lot of stuff being interconnected. Because like because the world is bombed out, you can only deal with these pockets of areas, and we know from, I keep saying Fallout's 1 and 2, but the fact that they're respecting that source material is beyond crazy to me, because those games weren't even made by Bethesda, but they're respecting the vault, and the fact that like a lot of the executive leadership that happened there, they're still keeping it to that region. So I just like that, like, because I thought they were going to go off script. Like, okay, like, we're going to scrap all the vaults, scrap this, scrap that. I thought they were just going to do their own thing. Like, okay, yeah, have fun with the other Fallout games, but we've got our thing we're doing. The fact that they were able to tie this and do what they did, the fact that we got, you know, pretty stellar performances from the cast, as we saw. You know, again, some of the things you just mentioned, I, you know, didn't, you know, like, yeah, those are complaints. But, like, it wouldn't cause me to lower my score that much. Because I would still give this, like, a 9.5 out of 10. Like, almost to perfection. But there are some things that's like, all right, okay, that didn't hit, that didn't land. But, like, I'm overall very satisfied with it.
It's kind of show. It's the kind of show. I'm going to give an 8, by the way, just to get out of the way.
Okay.
It's the kind of show, though, where I feel as if like a season 2 and they like kind of tweak this stuff will become like instant like 9.5 10 out of 10 for me. Like if they kind of address some of the stuff I was talking about, like again some of the tonal inconsistencies, if they're starting to expand to Nevada, like that will make it much bigger, and I imagine it might become more like a Game of Thronesy thing where they'll be following Maximus, Vigil, and Lucy, and if they separate, you'll be following two of them differently. And then obviously Hank's going to be cutting about. Like he's going to be. I think Hank's going to probably be the antagonist of the show. Like,
yeah. Well, the wife. Well, now it's like Lucy. That's why Lucy and the Ghoul teaming up is cool. Both of their family members could technically be villains. His wife and then Lucy's dad, right? And they could be in on it together.
They could be powering up together. You know, you never know. Like it could be. Because I get even. Because I mean, I don't know how old she was, but I mean, obviously he's a bit older now. Like he's in his maybe 60s or whatever in the show, but you could see like that kind of power up happened as well. So I guess that's actually a good way to kind of segue into like what our predictions are for the next season. This probably won't be as long a section. We have talked about a fair amount of stuff that we think might
Death
happen.
Claws and a lot of New Vegas references. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I would say New Vegas stuff. There's going to be a couple of interesting things. Like some people have said that in like, now I don't know how much canonically this will be, but like in so at the end of every episode they show like a kind of video cut. Like it's almost kind of like the beginning of the games, where they kind of zoom in on something quite small and they zoom back like from thousands and thousands back. In the final episode, they do that of New Vegas, and New Vegas is very run down.
Well, I'm curious though to see what direction they go, because again, like Vault-Tec, like the fact that they nuked certain places, like the NCR, seems like they just took them out. Like it seems like there's a bigger force that's like, if you stray too much into what they're doing, like they kind of like course correct. But like, what is that is the question.
All right, so I want to talk to you briefly about the Shady Sands situation. So, if I'm being honest, I don't think it's that big a situation, but there are a couple of like Fallout.
The situation sounds a little shady, so why don't we get to it?
Nice.
Yes, nice. But maybe I don't know context about this one. So what's going on?
So we wouldn't really know too much about this because we aren't Fallout die-hard loyal fans that have played the first 3 games.
I mean, listen, I know a good amount. I know lore from Fallout's 1 and 2, which a lot of people don't know. So,
all right, well, then you will know that Shady Sands was basically in the events of Fallout 1 and throughout most of the rest of the Fallout games. Shady Sands was considered like the NCR hub. It was actually the biggest city in like at least the West Coast. Like it had 30. I mean, they even showed it in the sign in the show. It had a population of like 34,000 people, which is insane for like a city. You know, like when you think about like Rivet City or Megaton or flipping what do you call the flipping one in Fallout 4? Flipping not the Commonwealth, but like the Diamond City. When you think of all them,
I just call it Fenway Park because that's where
Fenway
it is.
Park. They won't have like they definitely want tens of thousands, let alone 34,000. So basically, the NCR was considered a really, really, really strong force, especially in this is where the controversy comes in between Bethesda games, i.e., 3 and 4, and possibly 7 and 6, something like this, and the Obsidian games, which is 1, 2, and New Vegas. Because in all 3 of those games, including New Vegas, which takes place like over 100 years after their last game, the NCR was always a big deal. And one of the reasons why was because they had this stronghold called Shady Sands, which is where basically they based all of their stuff from. One of the big points in New Vegas is, if you remember, the 2 biggest factions in the Mojave are the NCR and Caesar's Legion, and the NCR are primarily there because they're trying to strengthen their hold of Nevada, because they basically have a pretty comfortable stronghold of California. Obviously, though, in the show, that's been retconned because there's a scene in Vault 4 with a whiteboard, or blackboard, sorry, and they have a timeline of Shady Sands, because there must have been like a history class or something, for the people up there, because a lot of them are refugees from Shady Sands, because the fall of Shady Sands is listed as 2277, but the events of New Vegas take place in 2281. So a lot of people are kind of like confused, because if they push that forward to like 2287, for example, then it would be fine, because the events of New Vegas take place in 2281, and that would have made sense because the NCR in that game are still like a really, really powerful force.
I guess I didn't align the years. I always thought that the NCR just got bombed afterwards. Like they got their foothold in New Vegas, took the Hoover Dam, and then
all went Pete Tong for them. Basically.
Yeah, and then Vault-Tec was like, all right, they're getting too big for their own good, and then brought them back down to fucking Earth and nuked them. Yeah.
That would make more sense actually in the lore, because Vault-Tec would have been like, they just killed one of our main guys, Mr. House, because he's no longer going to be in charge of New Vegas anymore.
Right. That's what I was. That's in my mind. That was I didn't realize the years, so maybe that just. But
that's why people are kind of like, why would you do that? So basically, what they're trying to do is that, and NCR in the actual show isn't really that big a presence. Like they're basically considered like kind of like they're like it's kind of a ragtag like rebel group almost, because Moldavia's in charge of the remaining NCR in the observatory, or at least what we know of in that area. But they're not really they're night and day from the NCR of like 15 years ago in the Mojave, when they were like a very because what do you call that base they had, like the very like southwest of like of the map. That's flipping. Basically, NCR had like a base there. If you remember, there's quite a lot of people there. So basically, like a lot of people complaining, like, why would the NCR care about the Hoover Dam if their flipping capital got nuked like 4 years earlier? If you know what I mean. So like people, and then also like you don't really know when they get, because the fall of Shady Sands is there, and then an arrow comes pointing out of it to a nuclear blast, like a mushroom cloud. So a lot of people are kind of wondering, maybe it didn't get nuked until after New Vegas, but then what would the fall of Shady Sands mean? There's a lot of kind of weird things that people are about.
Yeah, did it get overrun by something, or what?
Yeah, like what happened there? But then if anything happened that was bad for Shady Sands, why was it never mentioned in New Vegas? Like why? It's basically the years just kind of mess people up, and that's why a few people. Now again, I think it's a bit extreme, and if I'm being totally honest, like if we're going with the show in this stuff, then I don't really think it matters that much, and the NCR being decimated is probably just what the show wants, because it seems to me like
they treat them like the Enclave in a sense, because the Enclave is. Yeah. But the thing is, we already had a game where Fallout 3 is you like the lone wanderer joining the Brotherhood. Like he decimates the Enclave's force, cripples them, and that's it. The Brotherhood steals their technology, and then you see them using it in Fallout 4.
Yeah. So you're trying to figure out kind of what the big baddies are now. Like, is it going to be like the remnants of Vault-Tec and the remnants of the Enclave, or will the Brotherhood like turn bad? Because obviously this is the latest thing ever, so they could do whatever they want at this point. They could have the Brotherhood turn bad or something. Like maybe they might want to become totalitarian. Who knows? But people are just kind of annoyed because like it seems like Bethesda are only doing their stuff. So like we only care about Vault-Tec, Brotherhood of Steel, and the Enclave, which are like our things. And then the Obsidian things like the NCR or any sort of like settlements, or like New Vegas is Obsidian as well. If they want to basically like in season 2, which we'll get to in a second, if season 2 they want to have New Vegas built from the ground up, that's basically to old school fans' eyes, that's almost like just completely like completely carpet bombing any of New Vegas' progress and just making it like because they're going to turn New Vegas into like a Vault-Tec stronghold now with the help of like Hank and maybe some of the other people like get cryogenically unfrozen. Who knows? Like we're not really too sure because the biggest thing that kind of made people think, all right, New Vegas is not or the ending of New Vegas no longer applies is because whenever Hank shows up to look over at the New Vegas Strip, the lights are all off essentially. Whereas when the courier goes to New Vegas for the first time, the lights are all on and it's all bustly and obviously a lot of stuff is still happening. We're probably not going to know until season 2 anyway, like what's going to happen. But I guess that's a good segue into. Actually, first of all, what do you make of all that? Like, do you think it's all overblown? Do you think there's some merit to that, or because that's been something I've seen the discourse quite a lot on social media about people being quite frustrated at Bethesda attempting to kind of undo a lot of.
I've seen a lot of articles about this. There's one there's one on Forbes that talks about some of the New Vegas stuff where it's like the bombs dropped 2077, Fallout 76 2102, Fallout 1 2161, Fallout Tactics 2197. I don't know what the hell Tactics is. Yeah, Fallout 2 2241, Fallout 3 is 2277, Fallout New Vegas 2281, Fallout 4 2287, Fallout TV show 2296. So you're talking 15 years later from New Vegas to the show?
Yeah. Like, would that be a big enough jump to have, like, basically, like, if they do go with, like, maybe like, because we don't know, like, the house, like, they might go for the house ending, in which case Mr. House is still alive. Well, alive, you know what I mean? Like that's maybe where they're going for, because that would make more sense for Hank wanting to go and reunite with him, because he would have probably known who House was. Or if they're going to go for another ending, are they going to have that? We talked about this briefly like earlier in the video, but are they going to have like a career character, or are they just going to have no one? Are they just going to have him walk into an empty New Vegas Strip? Which I would think would be a bit crazy, because why would they have the Battle of Hoover Dam and control over New Vegas, a big thing like 15 years ago, and then just have no one care whenever it's, when the dust is settled? It's just, there's a lot of questions basically that they're going to need to figure out with season 2, like how they're going to incorporate that. Like on the one hand, I'm very excited to see New Vegas going to be incorporated. But on the other hand, like they need to be quite careful, like how they incorporate it while still honoring like the decisions made in the games, if they even care about that at that point.
Yeah. I don't even care. Well, I mean, there's conspiracy theories that like they, but like see, this is the thing with a game that has open-ended endings, right? Like you could choose your ending for the end of you could join Caesar's Legion at the end of Fallout New Vegas if you wanted to.
But yeah, but it seems as if like there's not really, because NCR seem obliterated. Caesar's Legion aren't mentioned. Brotherhood, obviously, like that's maybe a likely option, or well, maybe not with Hank going there. And then obviously,
well, I'm guessing the canon ending, if they wanted to pick one, would be you join the NCR. The courier wipes out Caesar's Legion, so they're done. Like they've been dead for a while, and the NCR is who you choose, but then they're the ones that get nuked with the Shady Sand stuff. Like that's.
Yeah, but then they could maybe move to like New Vegas as a new stronghold then, but then that wouldn't really make sense to why Hank's going there. You'd think that Hank would either go there if it's completely empty or if Mr. House is there.
We don't know. That's the thing. We don't know why he's going there, so like it's just like, oh, the location was teased. So like what is there? Maybe he's going to check on Mr. House and Mr. House is dead, that's
a 15-year-old corpse like at that point.
Yeah. I mean, it's like,
awesome. I'd love to see that. But then again, at that point they have to honor one of the endings. They got to figure out, or they know that they're going to say, right, House is dead, and regardless of what.
I want a Yes Man cameo. Remember that robot? Yeah, I want a Yes Man cameo.
Right. Well, we were going to talk about what we want to see in season 2. I want to see like more robots. I want to see serve bots. I want to see sentry bots. I want to see an actual.
That's right. There weren't any. Were there any Protectrons in this?
No.
That's like the quintessential robot.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that. Yeah, there
Yeah, the
hasn't been.
Protectrons were like the quintessential robot that was
Yeah,
not. But again, like they had to push their resources into certain areas, and again, like you have more runway
yeah.
to do more of this stuff. Like so, it's fine. Like there weren't any
Had
super
like a
mutants.
prototype Robo Brain, which I quite liked as well. Because
Robo,
obviously,
they had a mini Robo Brain in the when he gets into Vault 31 when he gets
yeah, that's
trapped
what I'm saying.
inside.
Yeah, yeah. Like they had the Romba basically.
Yep.
Um, but I quite like that because whenever that technology would have been developed, because that was Bud who's in the pre-war stuff, he must have just put his brain in like whatever at that time was around. Because obviously, like Robo Brain stuff was developed, I think, during like after the war, I think.
But some of these are the strongest enemies. Like Sentry Bots are the strongest robots. Death Claws are the strongest monsters. So it's kind of like, all right, we maybe if you think of the Fallout Season 1 as like Lucy trying to level up, like she's only
Yeah.
like a level 8. Like those are like level like 26 enemies maybe. Like if you're thinking of the game.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, what other creatures would you like to see? Like Mirelurks are another big one that wasn't
I
used.
thought Mirelurks were going to be in the water when she was getting drowned by the courier. Like
Yeah, yeah, but it was like a gulper, which apparently I think they're only in Far Harbor, like a DLC for Fallout 4, which is a really weird
yeah,
animal.
it didn't look recognizable when I saw it. I was like, what is this
Yeah,
thing?
I think that's what it is. I think because I kept on calling it a gulper, and I looked it up on the wiki, and it
Yeah,
said
so Mirelurks, mole rats would be cool.
I mean, obviously, we already mentioned Super Mutants and Death Claws are the two biggest ones that haven't
Yeah,
been mentioned.
they already have the Yao guy is. I think you sent me this where it's really funny when Michael Rappaport's character is like fuck, oh shit, fuck. Like it's like so many times when you're playing the game and you encounter an enemy you're not supposed to fight. That's exactly your
Yeah, you just run away.
reaction. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's cool. Like in
Actually,
some ways, it almost made you feel like you were playing it, but it's a show. Like
I kind of wish as well there was more guns. Like I quite like I liked having the 10 millimeter and like the kind of assault rifle that the Brotherhood were using, but and like they're also the what do you call it, the hand like chainsaw
yeah,
the
there was like the rocket launcher, the junk
ripper.
jet,
Sorry.
the
I do kind of wish we had more weapons. I wish we had like laser weapon. Like there's no laser or plasma
they
weapons.
show them, but they're not used. There's a
Yeah,
couple of scenes with people carrying laser rifles, but they're not. I don't
yeah.
think they're fired ever.
They could like they could. I would like to see just because there's so many weapons in Fallout. I'd love to see more of them. There's a couple of them. There's a lot of melee weapons and stuff in it. But yeah, in terms of actual like
One thing
firearms,
I was hoping that they would do, I don't know how you would do this though, and that might be where the discussion ended, how they would try to incorporate VATS. But like, I don't like. I don't know how you do that in the show to say
yeah,
like
I
she
think
has
they
like
just kind of ignored it because like enough people shot with Pip Boys in their wrists that like if they were going to do something they would have in season one, but I don't think they did. I did say before the show came out that they could maybe have like kind of like targeting assisting almost, where like maybe like the Pip Boy kind of like controls your wrist, so it has a better and it kind of follows you ever you're tracking, like that something like that. Also, one final thing about weapons actually, the biggest what's the most famous weapon in flipping Fallout that they didn't even use?
oh, Jared wanted to see it. The Fat Man.
Batman.
Jared wanted to see that. He's like, "Where's the Fat Man? I want to see the Fat Man."
Yeah, I
And
mean,
so
no Batman, no mini nuke explosions or
yeah.
anything. That's
Again,
pretty.
like these are that the Fat Man is the epitome of the weapons, just like the Deathclaw and the Sentry Bot are. They're like the A
Gotta have an
tier.
appetizer before the main course.
Well, right, exactly. It's like you don't want to shove everything into this one 8 episode thing. It's like, listen. Given the money and the ratings that they got off of this, I'm sure Amazon slash the greater team is like, oh, well, we could make 3, 4, 5 seasons of this. So let's
I was
not.
thinking of actually. Sorry, I was thinking of this actually during our wee break. This is also the kind of show that's ripe for like spin-offs, like Fallout flipping London or Fallout flipping. If you do want to do one in the
Which
capital,
we as fans have wanted to see international Fallouts because there's no Fallout that takes place internationally.
yeah, and like this is the kind of avenue where like I mean, even though it's hard to believe, but TV does run faster than video game development. So like you're probably more likely to get more spin-offs from the Fallout TV show than you would from the games in that case.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, it's
Well,
right for
because
that stuff.
think
Just
about
kinda
how
want to
long it's been since four. Four came out in 2015, and
yeah.
that's almost going to be 10 years. We
I mean,
know,
76.
yeah, and they're making Elder Scrolls 6 right now, and Todd Howard has said Fallout 5 is in development. But Fallout 5 is not going to come out for another 10 years, if that, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Now, however, here's a really cool note to end on. When Fallout 5 comes out, wherever they choose to go, do you think characters from the TV series will appear in even if it's a small way, in Fallout 5? Do you think that will happen?
Sorry, do you mind repeating that?
I said, do you think that characters from the Fallout TV series will appear in Fallout 5 whenever Fallout 5 comes out?
People have actually been talking about this. I don't know. I don't think they will, for being honest. I think they're going to try and keep the game and the TV show separate.
Like, come on. Like, I mean, you were saying earlier, like, if I'm able to fucking have Lucy as my companion, like, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
that's not bad.
I don't know. I feel like there'd be you know what I feel like would be the issue. Amazon having like the rights to stuff. I feel like Amazon would be like,
But Todd Howard and Bethesda, like, that's the thing. Like you said, like, Todd Howard is to this what Neil Druckmann is to The Last of Us. Like, isn't this still their Bethesda IP? Like, Amazon doesn't own it. Like,
yeah,
I don't know what the property breakdown of it is, because this issue happened with, what was it? I think it was either Breaking Bad or Walking Dead, where, like, it can, because it's either on AMC or Sony, like, it's like who decides the product, because didn't they have a problem with, like, the No Way Home, the spin-off with Spider-Man, where those were Sony, having Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, that was a Sony product, but this is like, yeah, there were issues there with the ownership. So I don't know. I'm sure, you know, for the good of the good of the storytelling, I'm sure they could figure it out. But that has to, if I know Todd Howard, that has to be on his mind. It's like, these are cool characters. Like you have to find a way to incorporate them.
There'll definitely be references. I think there might be like side characters I could see maybe being like utilized, like maybe having like, you know, like, I'm not sure whether they're going to do it through holotapes. That's another thing that was actually missing as well. But you know, everyone would incorporate that with like holotapes. But like whether you'd incorporate that kind of stuff or not, like, I don't know. It's up in the air, but I could see it being utilized. But right. Anyway, this video's been going on for long enough. Anyway, might as well give our final thoughts. In general, I thought it was a really, really solid start. As you say, my expectations were I was a bit nervous about it, but watched it all, quite enjoyed it. I said my criticisms about stuff anyway, but overall, again, I stand by my 8 out of 10, but I'm looking forward to season 2 anyway.
Yeah. No, and I stand by mine, but I'm just, again, I'll end this by saying what I started with, and I'm just happy that this is a thing now. Like, us as gamers, like, it's funny, no one knew about these things. Like, the Borderlands movie, like, all these games, it's like, no one knew about these products. Like, when we were playing them when they first came out, when Fallout 3 first came out, when Borderlands first came out, people were like, oh, that's that nerd. Oh, you like these games, and well, all right, I don't know, whatever. Now, you know, even The Last of Us. Now, they get pushed into streaming services. Everyone's just binge watching stuff, and now they're like, "Oh wow, this is enjoyable." It's based on a fucking game that I played. You probably roasted me on for playing decades ago.
Yeah, so, I've never been a big book reader, but I imagine this is kind of like what it's like having read a book like years before a film adaptation's been made, and you already know what's going to happen. And you already know about the world of things, you know. Obviously, some of the stuff is different because, like, some of the adaptations are like The Last of Us, where it's like a 1-for-1 remake. But then you have things like Fallout. I think Borderlands is going to be Borderlands kind of like going to be a weird like hybrid, because it's like it has characters from Borderlands 1 and 2 in it, and then it has like the plot. I think it's like Borderlands 1. I think it's the plot. It's just weird, but like you know, basically you'll obviously, having played the games, you'll have a much better understanding of these IPs before anyone else.
The thing I'll end with is that this made me want to play the show. Like, I was watching it, like, so many scenes, I'm like, yeah, I want to, like, play that sequence right there. Like, I was like, this, you could turn this into a game, and you could almost do it like Grand Theft Auto 5, where you're jumping from different character perspective. It's like, all right, now we're going to take you out of it and go to the ghoul, and now we're going to go to Lucy. Problem is, Fallout's always hung its hat on being an RPG with customization. So, but in this case, they're telling you these are these characters and these are their motivations. So, in that sense, it wouldn't work. But there were a lot of times where I just wanted to play what I was watching. And the fact that it was able to get me to that point, I think, is a win in and of itself. So,
yeah. All in all, yeah, I'm looking forward. You said 9.5.
Yeah.
What would your like 0.5 deduction be on?
Some of the things you had said, like, I definitely would have maybe liked a little more of the NCR Shady Sands explanation. Maximus's character, like, there were some times where his expressions were just not doing it for me. Like, when he wouldn't, like, leave the vault quick, it's like, you know, that turn was very quick. Yeah, there were some character decisions where I'm like, that's bizarre.
Oh,
but
The million dollar question, by the way. This is kind of unfair to compare them because they are quite similar adaptations. Because one's a
What,
one
Last
on
of
one.
Us and Fallout?
Which one do you prefer?
Yeah, but see, they do different things because Last of Us, like, verbatim went off of the first game, and this is like the sequel to those games, which is crazy. Which I didn't know that coming into this. I'm like, okay, this is gonna just rewrite the story of the games, whatever.
Completely unique and like completely like non-canon.
Yeah, I was like, this is a fucking cool ass thing. Like, it's an addition for us. It's like, and what a great way to get new fans, right? It's like, oh, like you can build up the hype for Fallout 5 by being like, yeah, we're gonna continue to explore things from the show and the games. It's like, okay, wow, what a double incentive, and you turn people who've maybe never played Fallout to go get the fucking new game, right?
Yeah. The one criticism you could say about the show for The Last of Us was, if you wanted to buy the game, you could, but you're basically just playing the same story. Whereas the Fallout games, they take place in like DC, in Boston, in Nevada. They take place in like places that are like not connected to California.
And the factions you're fighting against, the main enemy factions of 3, it's the Enclave. 4 is the Synths, which is it's not even explored in this because it was more of a Boston thing. Yeah, and then New Vegas is Caesar's Legion. It's none of those enemy factions are in this, but that shows you how big this universe is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All in all, yeah, I'm glad that it's kind of got a good adaptation. Again, I mean, we've been saying this more and more now, which I'm so happy about. I'm glad for these video games getting good adaptations. Looking forward to season 2. Don't know when the hell that'll drop. Probably like the year after The Last of Us. I'm being honest, if it's going by the same, flipping trajectory.
The only thing I'm disappointed is I wish if you fast forwarded, it would have just all the dialogue just turns into yep, yep. That would have been funny, like, you know. And of course I'm referencing in Fallout 4 because in Fallout 4 it's the only one where your guy can talk. And so when you mash through the speech options, he's just like, yep, yep.
Oh, so this is so small, but I want to acknowledge it. They should have cast Ron Perlman in some role he should have been in. The main narrator for like every Fallout game outside of 4, and he's not in the show.
See, that's like you didn't get the right sprinkles on your cake, right? Like that's another Easter egg where it's like, oh, I didn't get this thing, but I really wish I had it, you know.
They do drop the War Never Changes.
Yeah, they dropped the line, but yeah. I mean, but you know, but he was never a character in the game, though, right?
I know, but that's the thing. But like, you could have had him definitely as like a wee side character or something. Like just have a wee wink to be like, we know that you guys love this guy, because again, he is the voice of the game essentially.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. All right. Well, this has been a long discussion. I will probably cut and paste and get into the editing room on this one, but at least I have plenty of freaking Fallout footage to slam together. So there's no, you know, shortage of what you guys have been seeing. Me probably just shooting and doing random things across 3 and 4. I tried to make this a combination of both games just to show some diversity. Actually, funny enough, I didn't even mention this. The first playthrough I ever did on my channel was the Dead Money DLC for New Vegas. How did I go with this video without even mentioning that? So there's definitely some, like, you know, special nostalgia for this. When I had my old crappy camcorder from the spring of 2011. Wow. It's a real full circle there. I mean, obviously my other videos were about different stuff, but the first playthrough of, like, covering the release of something was the Dead Money DLC for very first for Fallout New Vegas. You know, actually, it's already probably in the footage, but this is my revelation of, putting in some Dead Money footage, my first ever playthrough incorporated into the modern day. What a great way to bring that into, like, the present day of my content.
You've ever thought that in 13 years later you'd be reviewing a TV show based on the game you were playing?
Yeah, if someone said, you're going to reuse content from your first playthrough, I'd be like, why would I want to use old camcorder footage? This is the only thing that could get me to do it. So, there we go. So, all right, guys, thank you for watching, and whenever there's a season 2 of this in the years to come, I'll jump into it, and you know, I guess just Bethesda's need to release Fallout 5. But all right, awesome. Thanks, guys. See you later.